Good morning. Good morning. This is Biniam on the Checkin In podcast. Today is August the 13th, 2021. Welcome. Welcome. Glad to have you guys joining in. I see you guys popping in already on the YouTube live stream, on the Instagram live stream, and the TikTok live stream. Thank you for choosing to spend a few moments with me this morning. This is the Checkin In podcast where we do three things very intentionally. We like to celebrate these things. And so, first and foremost, we like to grow in self-awareness of ourselves on a daily basis, getting to know ourselves better so we can navigate in this world much better. Secondly, we also like to learn to be kind to ourselves because that's a skill that is it's a tough one. It's a tough one for us, isn't it? And it's really important for us to learn. Thirdly, we also want to learn how to maximize our happiness. And we maximize our happiness, I feel, by processing all of the wide range of fantastic emotions, even the ones that we're most uncomfortable with. And we want to create a community that facilitates what that looks like, encourages what that looks like. Because don't we all want to just be happy at the end? Don't we want to enjoy some fantastic moments in the midst of a life that is already a struggle? And so that's one of the things I want to commit myself to, even as I interact with you guys. I want to encourage you in what that could look like. And so I would love for your participation, your partnership with me as we do this too. So yes, I think you have alopecia in your beard. I'm not sure what that is, but can you tell me what alopecia is? Because I'm not sure what that is. I appreciate the love that you guys are sending me in the live streams already. Someone just saw my bow tie thing. I posted a bow tie tutorial this morning, and so that's what they're referencing. So glad to have you guys join in. Today's question we are answering is, what do you see yourself doing work-wise in 5 years' time? This is one of those reflective questions about our future, and so I'm looking forward to diving into that for myself today. Well, first of all, assess the question, look at some of the merits of the question and why it's important for us to even think of answering the question. But I'm so thrilled you've joined me today on the Checkin In podcast. You're welcome, and I'm glad you're here. So, what do you see yourself doing work-wise in 5 years' time? I know lots of you, my listeners, are younger than I am, and some of you are still in that early season of life, maybe in your 20s or even in your teens. And so this is one of those questions I'm not sure if you've given much time to. Pratik already knows what his is. He's going to be a cop. Once upon a time, I wanted to be a cop too, Pratik. My goals have changed over the years quite a bit. But let's look at the question first and see why this is a worthwhile question investing in. I see Christian coming in saying he wants to craft more music and become more successful going forward on that path. That is fantastic. That's awesome. I see you guys all coming in here. So glad to have you all join in. I am going to decline live stream requests just because this podcast I want to facilitate more so how I want to model thinking through and preparing for the future, becoming better versions of ourselves. And so a relationship coach, my dear Leanne, I think you're already doing fantastic in that arena, aren't you? I can't wait to see you a little later on this morning, which is going to be fantastic. It'll be great to connect with you. So why I think this question is really important is because I don't think it is worthwhile coasting through life. I think there are so many of us today who sort of are like that leaf on the water, and it needs it's kind of helpless on the current. It just kind of gets taken wherever it will. Pratik says he needs a relationship coach. Pratik, if I can give a commendation of my dear friend Leanne, who is in the chat presently, you need to get in touch with her because she is fantastic at what she does. I know her and her husband personally, and I would highly recommend them for you. I see Ollie saying, I'm only 16, but I have a job as a chef, and my goal is to work on a private yacht. That sounds amazing, Ollie. Lucas says, growing food through aquaponics gardening, being my own boss, hopefully. You know, being your own boss is something spectacular if you have that option to pursue that. But it's a grind, but totally worthwhile. It's one of those things I've so appreciated in my experience as an Uber driver is being my own boss, because being my own boss enables me to be able to make my own calls on how I value my time and where I'm going to portion my time. So let's look at this question though. what do you see yourself doing work-wise in 5 years' time? What I like about this question is that it gets us in the mode of thinking future, future-wise. It gets me in the mode of thinking, how am I taking life by the horns and saying, I want to be intentional about where I'm going. I don't want to be that leaf that is helpless in the current, being taken wherever. Well, so many of us experience life that way. We're kind of just sitting there and we feel like we're being controlled by the various twists and turns life takes. This question gets us into that mode of thinking, how can I take back into control as much as possible my future? How can I not leave it up to destiny? How can I not leave it up to chance? But how can I be strategic about where I want to see myself going? And then it causes us to become more self-aware, which is one of the premises of this podcast, is how can we grow more in self-awareness? That's the first thing. The more we know ourselves, the more we can say specifically, here's what I want, here's what I don't want, here's what I like, here's what I don't like. Here's what I value. Here's what I'm not too keen on. And the more we grow in self awareness, the more we can be precise, the more we can be specific in the angle or direction we want to go in life. And I think that's a fantastic thing that we want to commit ourselves to. What does that look like for us to even start thinking about our future that way, by way of saying, here's what I want to see more of, here's what I want to experience more of. I love that it helps us get into that mode of saying, how can we control our destiny as much as we're able to? How can I think about those things of where I want to steer towards? And then how can I not just say, I hope it happens, but how can we start taking steps towards that end over time? Intentional action. I do like that. Reese, my dear friend, good to see you. It's good to see a lot of your friends coming in the live stream here. So I like the intentionality. I like what Dan was saying. It's got to be intentional. You know, life is really difficult when you don't feel like you have options. When you don't feel like when you don't feel like you have options, then you feel like you are sort of being controlled by factors beyond you. But when you feel like you are able to extend some expression of what you value, what you resonate with, what you really want to see happening, it's fantastic. Second thing I want to note about this question we're talking about today, what do you see yourself doing work-wise in the next 5 years' time? Is that it gives a set amount of time that I think is realistic. I like the 5 year mark because, oh, my dear Reese, you're so funny in the comments. I like that it gives you a reference of time, a 5 year frame with which you can work towards. And as you're looking at that 5 year reference there, it gives you time realistically to see change over time. The thing is, oh, this is too funny. Reese goes from Instagram to TikTok to the YouTube channel. It's so great. But anyway, as I'm going along here, one of the things I think that's really fantastic is how the 5 year frame of reference gives you a chance to be able to grow into the person you want to be over time. I recently had a really sad experience where I broke a connection relationship wise because this individual was letting some toxic influences into their life. And one of the things I was saying is, I love being connected to you, but I can't stick around if you're open to letting toxic things into your life, because what that's going to do is it's going to overflow into my sphere. And as much as I like being connected in this context with you, I can't let toxicity into my life, and I can't let channels of toxicity into my life. And so I'm going to have to take a departure from this connection here, because I need to implement those boundaries. And so I think about that, even as I think about how that individual with a toxic input was making promises saying, oh, I've changed, there's nothing wrong anymore. And I was saying, I don't think I'm ready to buy into that quite yet. I do believe we change, but I think change takes time. And so the 5 year mark is a really good reference point that gives you space to work towards whatever it is you want to be. And as we grow more self aware of who we are and what we desire and what we want to experience in this world, it enables us to start making those appropriate changes, those incremental changes. I believe in incremental changes over time that enable us to move towards this trajectory in life, that enables us to say, we want to become this kind of a person, and here's how we're going to work our way towards that. I've seen that in my own context in many ways. I used to have a struggle with anger once upon a time. I used to be a very violent person. People don't believe it. They're like, I can't see that, Binyam. Like, that's not you. And that This belief is testament to how I've changed over time. It wasn't a snap decision. It was one where I acknowledged the beginning and saying, I got a problem. I got to start working my way towards what I want to see happening. And so, towards that extent, that incremental change takes time. In the same way, when we're talking about our goals and aspirations work-wise for the future, what does that look like for us to be able to express and say, where do we want to go and what kind of steps we want to implement along the way to get to that destination? It might be something that requires some schooling on your part, maybe a huge investment of school. You're going to need to make that as well. Um, Hey, Sumaniyu, I would love to see your recommendations for thumbnails. It's one of those things beyond my expertise, so I'm happy to see your suggestions. Furthermore, as you're working on yourself, as you're going more self-aware, and you're saying, "Here's where I want to go," there is that necessary component that we must sign on for, and that is we can't change in just a moment. We want to change over time in small ways, getting better each and every day as best as we can, being in a community that supports such growth, that supports such a trajectory that enables us to say, this is a good movement. This is a good trajectory that I'm on here. And so that's another thing I'm seeing in this question of what do we want to see ourselves doing in 5 years' time, work wise? And then I also like that this also enables us to move into that zone where we start growing on our expectations, our anticipation of what could be. I like the kind of shift and change that enables us to grow in relish. Do you know what it's like when you're preparing? Let me say it this way. Do you remember what it was like at Christmas time when you were young and you were looking forward to Christmas morning? There was that expectation, that anticipation of delightful presents that you got to open up, and you're so thrilled about what you were going to experience there, right? You're like, "Ah, what am I going to get?" Birthdays are the same thing. Once upon a time when we got presents, we couldn't wait for our birthday because we were experiencing this. Something great is going to happen, right? This question, I think, also gets me in that zone of what does this look like as I prepare for my future, where I'm going to go and how I'm going to experience it? What do I want to actualize in my future and how do I prepare for that? It's worthwhile dreaming, it's worthwhile having these ambitions. For some of us, this ambition has died a long time ago because we've forgotten what it's like. We've sort of settled for circumstances in life have just beat us down to a point where we're like, oh, but what does it look like now for us to prepare for such a future whereby we can extend ourselves and saying, I want to experience this. I want to go to Disneyland maybe, or I want to jump out of a plane and go skydiving, or I want to become a doctor, or I want to visit every continent in the world. What do these things look like for us as we go through life? Um, so that is one of those things that I'm thinking in reference of this question. What do we plan to do in the next 5 years, or where do we hope to see ourselves in the next 5 years? What kind of goals do we want to implement? Let me dive into the question with my answer now. I've got some big goals, some big dreams, some things I want to establish or accomplish. Reese says, Binyam, you get better day after day. Honestly, just amazing. Thank you, my dear friend. So kind. DM'd me on Instagram. Thank you, Sumani. I appreciate that. I can't wait to connect with you. So let me dive into my answer to this question of what do I see myself doing work-wise in 5 years' time? At the very heart of it, I see myself many, inspiring many. I want to start an international conversation on how we can make kindness more accessible as the medium in which we connect with one another as human beings. I want to see if we can start. Am I feeling? Okay? I'm feeling fantastic. Thank you for asking. I want to see how we can start this international conversation that gets us talking about how we can be intentional about the medium of kindness and the way we connect, whether we are in business together, whether we're in relationships together, whether we're having tough conversations in which we may have to part company, but how can we do that with kindness? I want to see our way that we engage as human beings transformed radically because of the medium of kindness. So we're intentionally choosing to engage and interact with. That is what I want to see myself doing work-wise in 5 years' time. Now, that's a big picture that I want to see happening in my life in 5 years' time. But what specific ways do I want to be doing that in? Well, one of the things I am looking forward to extending my influence through is through podcasting. And so here I am in this podcast with you guys. And this podcast, I'm really thrilled about this podcast. Let me tell you, our viewership may be really low right now. Many people may not know about it, but what we're doing right now, the way that we are engaging and connecting on the themes that we're focusing on this podcast is so critical for me, so intentional and so strategic. I have those three reference points in which I'm aiming for this podcast again. In case you're coming in and unsure what we're doing here, we want to do three things in an intentional way, in an obvious way, in a less subtle way. We want to be very intentional about the way we are getting to know ourselves. Self-awareness is one of those things I want to grow in myself, and I want to encourage you to do that for yourselves as well. What does that look like as we become more self-aware of ourselves, to say, here is how we know ourselves as well as we can to do what we feel we need to do in this world? Before you make any impact externally, it's so important for you to know yourself internally. Does that make sense? Before you reach out externally to touch and influence others in their lives, get to know who you are first and foremost, and what makes you you, what values you hold dear, what you want to export from internal to external. That's the sequence that I see things happening. And secondly, we want to learn to be kind to ourselves. We want to learn how to be gracious in the way that we're growing as human beings, because all of us need that kind of grace. All of us need the kind of second chance. What does that look like for you to give yourself permission to fumble and feel your way forward? And thirdly, how can we maximize our experiences of happiness by processing the entire range of legitimate emotions, making space and learning how to be able to deal with all those emotions, not fearful and hiding from some of them and only experiencing some of them. We want to learn how to appropriately express and communicate all of those emotions. Hi, Beniam. Would love for you to do a live. Where are you? Not doing your podcast so we can exchange. That would be amazing. I hear the call there. Oh, okay. Let me see if I can touch on that at the end, my dear friend. Hang on, and then let's see if we can engage, because I would love to facilitate that option of still connecting with you guys. So, one of the ways that I want to make an influence internationally in the world is by extending this theme of kindness. But as I do so, I also want to be able to encourage others towards it. And one of the primary ways that I'm investing in doing that is by podcasting. Podcasting gives me an opportunity to share my ideas, to have people engage and interact with my ideas. How long, my friend? I am thinking here. I have, let's see here, it's about 8 more minutes on this podcast. And at the end, I'll be able to address your request, because I do hear it quite often. And man, I'd love to serve you guys as best as I can. So hang on till maybe 8 more minutes here. So podcasting is one way that I want to do so. I've got my website as well, benimasters.com, where I am featuring some tiers in a membership format, where I want to connect more one-on-one with you guys to be able to encourage and inspire you along in your own journey of what this could look like. I want to create a community that is very intentional about doing this. I want to facilitate this kind of a conversation, not only publicly in free content like this, but I also want to put together a community that is very intentional about when we connect, we have this agenda of growing together this way. And so that's what I'm doing on my website as well. And I want to facilitate that. Another way I want to do this is, I know some have encouraged me saying, you should be a motivational speaker. I would say hell yes to that. I would love, if I can inspire others, I would totally be all over that. I'd want to sign up for that. And I want to